So that discipline from the sports itself, because for me, sports is it's more than just a game. I always say it's more than just a game. It teaches you a whole lot of stuff, right? Discipline, dedication, commitment, all that comes into play. Yeah, it's fun. We get out there, we play, but these things, they build characters, right? So if I'm sprinting to the line, but then I don't get there, I just cut corners, right? And I keep doing that over and over, that becomes part of my character. Guess what? In life, I'm always gonna be doing similar things. I'm always gonna find ways to cut corners. So it's always been, even now in my organization, in the academy, that's what I'm instilling with the kids. Every time, that's what I preach. You gotta take that extra step. Finish the run. Don't cut corners. Don't go halfway, because in life, whether we like it or not, that becomes part of us as we move on.
Welcome to the Follow Forward podcast. This is real stories, global voices, and Christ-centered servant leadership. My name is Tim. I'm your host, and as always, we have a special guest with us. And today, on this podcast, in today's episode, we have Bethuel Maja. You are known in South Africa, America, and the world over by your name, China. That's how I know you, and that's how we'll be. You're happy for me to refer to you as China for the rest of the podcast?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Fine, thanks, China. I could call you coach. Of course, that's the other thing. You're known as, and because of your role in football, the player in football development and coaching, which is where we met. And so
Yes.
you reminded me that the first time we met was in Mali, of all places, in
Yes.
2001. It was the Africa Cup of Nations, and we were part of quite a large delegation that went
Right.
up from South Africa. I mean, what are your memories of that particular trip?
That was an eye opener for me. I believe the first time we met, I met you at the airport. I still
Yes.
remember that vividly. We were just flying out. Um, we had, I think, two different organizations flying out there, Ambassadors in Sport, Athletes in Action, and I was involved with both organizations. So
It was Chris
um,
Dirks, wasn't it? Chris Dirks was
yes,
introduced
Chris
us to
Dax,
one another.
absolutely,
Chris is
absolutely.
now the National Director of Campus Crusade for Christ in South
That's
Africa.
awesome. Yes,
Yeah.
that's awesome. No, great guy. Chris is a great guy. So for me, it was an honor because I had the opportunity to be able to work with both groups, but the mission and everything was the same. Using sports as a vehicle to reach out and share the gospel. So I was very fortunate and privileged in that trip. I met a whole lot of people. We had a great time, but not only that, we were able to do a lot of the ministry outreach within the community. I remember the guy that had the opening ceremony, the song, that he was one of the big musician at that time. And somehow me and this other guy, he was speaking French. I didn't know French, but somehow we ended up going to town together because I wanted to buy like the outfit, the African outfit. So we ended up going into the store, and on that store, the lady that was there, that was the gentleman's mom. So she called him over, and we ended up spending time. We invited him over actually to where we were staying. We ended up having the dinner. It became a big thing there. Everybody were excited because this he was like the the
Celebrity.
yeah, it was a celebrity there, and everybody knew him, and he just did that opening song that everybody loves, and he was a Muslim guy, so we got to sit down and we were talking. He shared his side of the story, so it was just an awesome experience, open dialogue, and yeah, that's some of the memories. Just
Yeah.
getting out to the community with you and the crew, playing some soccer, halftime and end of the game, sitting down with the group and evangelizing, sharing our testimonies. It was just amazing.
Yeah. I mean, that was a very formative trip for me. I think, in terms of my heart for Africa, for the cities in Africa, and back then, I think Mali was statistically the third poorest country on the planet. It was a really underdeveloped country. Remember, there was only two tarred roads.
Oh yeah,
Everything was sand roads, hundreds of bicycles and motorbikes,
yeah,
few cars, and I mean, I have if we got into stories from that particular trip, so many stories of that trip. I mean, let alone having to. I think we got to know each other at the airport so well because I think we had an 18-hour layover in
yeah.
Ghana just getting to Mali was hard enough. Back then, I remember there was no internet. I was newly married, and 3 weeks I was in total in Mali at that time, and hardly been able to get messages home. I mean, it was really that kind of cutting edge trip. But it's on things like that I think brotherhood is really formed, isn't it? A friend of mine says
Yes,
when you've bled together for the gospel, you're kind of brothers for life, and
that's
and
true.
and so I think that's why, even though we ourselves, our paths, and we're going to talk about that, have diverged in some ways, we've remained in touch, but we have that kind of same heart and passion because when you've been in those kind of situations together, and particularly through the avenue of sport, it does form such a
From
strong
the
bond.
strong bond, absolutely,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
it's great. So I don't want to become a nostalgic episode of Follow Forward, but it is underlining, I think, once again, that one of the aims of this podcast is to be, although it's a global audience, or at least we have guests from around the world coming on this podcast. It's an African-facing podcast. We want to have this emphasis on empowering and supporting and strengthening the heart and vision for raising up young African leaders. So that's why I think that particular trip was so remarkable for us. But China, let's go back a few years. So what life was like for you growing up in South Africa, and then maybe tell us a little bit of your journey that led you along this pathway to a full-time career in sports.
Sure. Oh, so in South Africa, let me just share a little bit about my background. I was born in Mpumalanga, Nelspruit. My family, we left Mpumalanga, migrated to Polokwane, and that's where my grandfather was. So, we wanted to be closer to my grandfather. He was of age and stuff. So my grandfather was um was a priest at our church. That's where my faith and everything started from. I was named after. He actually passed on the year I was born. So I took his name, but um, just growing up within the family, it's always been faith-based. Grew up in church. My dad actually played for Orlando Pirates. Way back when he played with Kezamtang, Jomosono, and all those folks. So I had faith side and also the soccer side, and my dad instilled a lot of that. I remember at 12 years old, I was at a boarding school in Polokwane, and I heard about an opportunity to go play for an academy in Johannesburg. So I packed up my bags at 12 years old, left home. That was the journey. I said I want to go, chase after my dream, and that's what I did. I got there for the first time. This was back in 1995. Was the first time I ever did soccer tryout, really. And the crazy thing about it is the people that select you to be part of the group, it was the fans themselves. They will make a lot of noise and agreeance into him. This is the guy that we want. And some of the teammates that you're gonna play with, they were, encouraging some of that. That's where the name China really came out. First time somebody there was Your name was China, and that just stuck
That's it.
since
Or
then.
nicknames. For anyone that doesn't follow South African soccer, nicknames is a rite of passage, isn't it? If you get a
Yes,
nickname, that actually means they've seen something in you. They've seen some talent,
correct.
and they've got to
Yes.
name that. Yes. Yeah.
That's it. That you have to put something on it. So that's where the name started. And so I moved from that was in Alexander. I moved to Soweto. And I was spotted by a coach that I'm actually currently working with, and we'll talk about that maybe later on. But he scouted me and took me to another academy in Max Park. It was run by Farouk. The coach that scouted me, his name was Paradise Mwekezi. And then he took me to the Transnet School of Excellence in that was situated in Max Park. And then from then, Farouk was there. He took us to Kaiser Chiefs Academy, and that's where we went to my journey with the whole thing about playing, getting into the more serious stuff about soccer, getting the opportunity playing for the Kaizer Chiefs Academy, going to playing for the national team, and eventually you, you know, uh, that's where I met Chris through. He was doing campus ministry for us. He'll come spend time with us once a week, and so that was actually really impactful because when other people were going somewhere else, we were coming in, sitting down with them for about an hour. We'll read the Bible, pray through, and all that stuff. So that really impacted me personally, and that's where the journey started really of then getting into using sports as in ministry. That led to me meeting you, Mali, and then going to Mozambique, Swaziland with you, and all that stuff. So that's
Yeah.
where all
Yeah.
that started.
Yeah. Remarkable. And just to hear the story because obviously tens of thousands of young South Africans have that dream. And we know that that sometimes can be a challenge because they pursue that dream at the cost of their education or at the cost of other important things in their life. They think that the ball can be the, their opportunity for fame and fortune and the rest. But we know that that actually only happens for the few.
Very
And
few,
some
very few.
and so, you embarked upon that. Obviously, that was a dream for you in terms of a career. You tasted some success at the highest level. You represented internationally as well. And yet then your pathway took a different turn. Um, and actually football did become a pathway for you, but in a very different way. How did it come about that you ended up then going to the States and playing in America?
So during when I went through, I would say a separation with uh, Chiefs at that time. So we went a different path. So I was still involved with the ministry, still spending time with Chris and the groups. And then we we did a trip to Mali, and that trip I was able to meet yourself and another
Aaron.
group, which is Aaron and also Aaron Treadway, and then also Roger, right? So Roger was also part of the ministry.
Hmm.
So because I was working with both organizations, so I had an opportunity to with Athletes in Action to go in Canada, to go play in Canada and stuff, and then but I also had an opportunity to come to the United States, which both organizations gave me that opportunity. And Athletes in Action and Ambassadors in Sports. Right. So Ambassadors in Sports was, hey, there's an opportunity in America, you can go play there. And then Athletes in Action said, hey, you can go to Canada and play and do some ministry work there. So both sides. So I decided because education, my mom was a teacher for 35 years. So education is always another pillar that was important in our family, you know. For me, it was faith, sports, and education. So I decided that the avenue for the US was for education while also playing soccer. So I decided to take that avenue. And none of this would have been possible if it wasn't for the people that I met throughout the journey. You know, have contributed tremendously, have helped me million times just to help me get to where I am today. And I will forever, be grateful for that. And I always remind you of that every time we
Yeah,
talk
well,
to someone.
in all honesty, it was a small part, but of a bigger picture that God
Yes,
had for your life,
absolutely.
and so it's
Absolutely.
always a privilege and an honor to be able to play a small part because the theme of this podcast, follow forward. We've got to do the things that are in front of us in
Yes.
obedience to the Lord, and when we're doing those
Yes.
things in front of us in pursuit of following the example of Christ, then that obedience leads us to fulfill the purpose that He has for us, and that's what I've seen happen for you. But it still must have been a big adjustment. I mean, you
It
grew up
was.
in semi-rural South Africa and Mpumalanga, okay, Polokwane, a little bit better. You went bigger. You went eventually to the big smoke of Johannesburg, but it's still a big step
It
to
is.
go from there to college in the States. How did you handle some of that initial culture shock?
Uh, so if you remember, this was during I think 9/11 just happened, right? Right in 2001. So it was just too chaotic, whatever, with the visa situation and all the stuff, and thinking, man, should I go? At that time, I was actually training with Sundowns, right? I was actually in tryouts with Sundowns, with the gentleman Ted Dumitro, the late Ted. So I was actually with him for about 4 months there, but he then was leaving, going to somewhere in Africa to take a role as a director of coaching for some national team. And he's like, hey, there's a new coach coming in. I'm gonna recommend you to him. If you want to stay, let him give you a shot. But this opportunity to the state opened up, and I told him, "And thank you so much. I appreciate it, Ted, for everything you're doing, for me. But I'm gonna go ahead and just move to the state." And all this was the foundation of my faith, right? Because during the chaotic with 9/11 and all that stuff, we didn't know what we were going to do. I didn't know what I was walking into. Didn't know anybody here for that matter. But I just had to be faithful to say, hey, this is the door, just like you just mentioned, that God just opened that door. I had no way to pay for my tuition in South Africa. I had no way of going to school. So I didn't have a job. So this door was the only one that's open. So just I followed through, just like the podcast is saying, just stepped out in faith and followed the door that God opened.
Mm. So what was some of I mean, you had a successful college soccer career. You obviously studied at the same time. What were some of the key lessons that you learned um, during that particular phase?
Discipline, just discipline in everything that we do, because it takes a lot. Like there's no manual that they say, hey, you come here, you follow the script, everything is gonna be okay. We literally just learn on the go. New people, language, English definitely was was one of the barriers that we had to overcome and stuff. But just stayed faithful, but was always disciplined in my studies. So I got my undergrad in business, with a concentration in marketing. Then I went to get my MBA, my master's, in a concentration in finance. So that discipline from the sports itself, because for me, sports is it's more than just a game. I always say, it's more than just a game. It teaches you a whole lot of stuff, right? Discipline, dedication, commitment, all that comes into play. Yeah, it's fun. We get out there, we play, but these things, they build characters, right? So if I'm sprinting to the line, but then I don't get there. I just cut corners, right? And I keep doing that over and over. That becomes part of my character. Guess what? In life, I'm always gonna be doing similar things. I'm always gonna find ways to cut corners. So it's always been, even now in my organization in the academy, that's what I'm instilling with the kids. Every time that's what I preach. You know, you gotta take that extra step, finish the run. Don't cut corners, don't go halfway, because in life, whether we like it or not, that becomes part of us as we move on, whether it's jobs, whether it's relationships, whether it's, we're always gonna find that. But if you stretch yourself, your character becomes that, then you're always gonna be. So those are some of the things I think I've learned throughout just being here in the States, going through the schooling because it takes a lot, plus also the playing soccer.
Well, let's bring the story up to date, because you now run. Is it COSA? You say it
Coach.
COSA, COSA,
Yes,
which is a wonderfully South African sounding uh, football institution that you now, or soccer institution that you now have in the US. You're a coach yourself, but it sounds like you're more than a coach. You're the director of the program. This is very much. It seems like your baby, from what I can tell. So
absolutely.
tell me how that came about, and what the progression has been, and how as a South African in the States leading a soccer program, how's that been as an experience for you?
It's been an amazing experience. So I never wanted to initially own an academy or own a club. So after my graduation, I went to work for a bank for about 4 years, and then I got picked up by another gentleman that saw me in the bank. I was doing a lot of his transaction. He was having a startup company, so he wanted somebody to come do his finances within the company. So I moved there, and I was with him this year 10 years, and he just sold the company. So the company was making, when got there, it was making about 2 million roughly a year, and 10 years later we're averaging about 50 million with three different locations, and I was handling the finance part of stuff. So we became really really good friends. But when I was at the bank, I had to walk away from the game, right? I couldn't coach just because of the hours that we were working. I couldn't be available, whatever. So, and it was a good opportunity, but at the same time, I knew something was missing. And when this opportunity came for me to go move and work for a startup, I had my weekends available that I could be able to coach. And then that's when I was able to get back into coaching. But when I went back in, I wanted to do something that, because the area I was at, we were struggling. We were losing a lot of kids to closed markets. Like kids would drive 2 hours just to get good training. They would drive, 3 hours just to get good training. And I was like, that's just too much. We got to do something to the kids locally. So that's what I did. That's where Corsa was born. Was more so to gear towards elite players that can be able to compete, and trying to find them to compete at the highest level possible they can. And we have achieved that in about, it took us about 6 years to do that. The organization has been up and running for 8 years now. So but it took us 6 years to where we were able to feature um a team in the US youth championship, which is basically the whole entire country. Only top level teams make it there. So for us, we were a small academy, but we were able to achieve that in 6 years. So um, I was really, really proud of that. But the whole focus for our organization was to give platform for the high level players that they can be able to express and compete with the neighboring markets. So it actually went further than that, because we were able to take him to the national stage. So
Hmm. Oh,
so
amazing! Congratulations.
mhm.
So this is now your full time
Yes.
role.
Yes. Also right now I'm doing full time. So we have in South Carolina we have three locations, and then we have another location in PA. recently just opened up Costa Africa in Johannesburg. So we are currently building it out. We just got a farm. More so gearing for Africa because we wanted to take what we're doing here, the opportunities for kids here. Let's go ahead and duplicate it and do it back home for those. So we're excited about that journey.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. Sounds incredible. So obviously, part of Follow Forward is thinking about leadership and trying to shape leadership, obviously in the example of Christ, and also say it's remarkable what people are doing on the ground. There can be so many leaders who are, we know that leaders get a bad press. There's a lot of things going on in the world today, and it often is the bad news stories. But we want to elevate good news stories of what God is doing and the lessons that have been learned at the coal face of leadership. And China, you've got, I think, a unique perspective. Not only have you got the cross-cultural experience of having been raised in one country, now lived most of your adult life in a different country. You've also got the perspective of of the corporate world that you experienced for a while and what it took for you to be a success within that world. And now, as a coach and a sports director, that gives another level of perspective on leadership. So as you're guiding youngsters and young people, you already talked about discipline and the importance of discipline. But as you think about leadership and as you have developed your own style of leadership, what are some of the primary ingredients that you think are necessary to be an effective leader? And particularly maybe how have you shaped that based upon some of the experiences you've had?
Sure. Um, it will, for me, it wasn't easy. For the academy, when we started, it was just me and another gentleman. Actually, consider he's from Uganda as well. He then moved and opened Corsa over in PA. That's where he is right now to expand the brand. But God has been so faithful because even I, I went through that struggle because it's like, with the game, you always Saturday, Sundays, you're out
Right.
coaching and all that. And I was like, man, sometimes you miss the church, you're not able to go and attend and stuff. So just praying through that, God has also just shown me, hey, this is another platform that you can use to be able to make a difference, right? So I've just taken you from here. Now I've given you this baby. Now it's for you to go ahead and get it to be faith based and be able to go ahead and share your faith, your experience with the kids that you can guide them the right way. Because the biggest thing for me is not necessarily all the wins or them going whatever. It's to see them coming out as being good personnel, right? Good characters that they're gonna make a difference later on in life. Because we instill a lot of discipline and we demand a lot out of the kids. But going back to your question, God has really brought in a lot of people that um one of the person that's running our women's program, she's a professor at the university. Another gentleman owns his own company. Another gentleman works for the media company. So a lot of these guys that I have an opportunity to lead, these are guys that you would say they're older and also they hold I would say higher position in society, so to say, being a professor, owning his own company and whatever. But yet you're younger and you're able to come into this space and be able to direct and just watching the faces, people listening to what you're saying, where we're trying to take a program and believing in the direction that you're trying to take the organization. So for me, it's always been it's been humbling. Um and all this, to be honest, I know people keep saying that, but for me, I still push it back to my faith and God, because none of this would be possible without him,
Mm,
Tim, not even anywhere close. He literally just bringing the right people into the space for us to be able to achieve
yeah,
our mission. It doesn't come without any challenges, of course, but we have been able to build something with everybody within the organization being proud of. And um, I am happy with the space that we've created. And now he's actually with the Costa Africa. We've literally taken out guys that used to coach national team, even Bafana. They are part of that space. Guess what? These gentlemen are all older guys that used to be prominent coaches. I'm talking about guys that coach the national team, professional teams, taking players to professional levels. They literally just as of last week, they had a clinic in Val with about 54 coaches there doing a clinic for them under COSA. Again, that it's not anything I would say, hey, that's my wisdom or anything like that. It's following, just like the podcast say, what God is set in front of us. And I'm just
mm,
following as he leads, he says, we turning right, here's the door, walk into this space. That's what we're doing.
mm, yeah. Oh, great, great. So good to hear, and wonderful to hear that the new doors that are opening up for you with Corsa, and obviously that will bring you opportunities and maybe some new challenges along the way. But again, I'm really touched by these stories of the diaspora, those who've moved to so-called greener pastures, but who still recognize the almost responsibility or passion that they have to invest in where they've come from. And I don't think I really realized that in terms of your story. I know this is quite a new development, but it's wonderful to see that it's giving back and giving fresh opportunities for the next China to come through, the next young person who just needs uh, that opportunity, that fresh start, someone to believe in them. That's what can be transformative. And so often that's a relationship, it's a connection, it's a conversation that opens up a door that can lead to other things. And all we can do is hold out the hand of opportunity and trust that people will take that and that God will
Absolutely.
use it to multiply that. So I'm extremely encouraged to hear that what's happening back in Johannesburg, that COSA is not an American thing. It's something that is going to transcend, and that's exciting to hear. So tell us then, as we begin to wrap up, China, what are you excited for the future? What is this dream that has emerged that maybe you couldn't have imagined a few years ago, but is now impacting lives? You've talked about bringing the ministry into COSA as well and ensuring that the faith basis, that God is at the center of this. What a unique opportunity you have to influence these young lives, not just as football players, but in the whole of their lives, in their faith as well, and to be a testimony into that. So, what are some of your dreams for the next 5, 10, 15 years?
The biggest thing for me, Tim, I've always and I'm still preaching it now. It's the most important stuff for me. It's stuff outside the white lines, right? So anything within the white lines is I would say, I don't want to say easy, but it's something that I've lived since I was 4 years old. The game, the coaching, the teaching, and all that stuff. That right there, it's something that comes naturally because it's a God given gift. We talk about following your gift because your gift will open doors that naturally, education or whatever, they wouldn't necessarily open that. We have to make sure, especially with Costa Africa. My goal is we gotta make sure then that the kids, by the time they leave our program, they have something to fall back to. Education being one of them, right? Want to go into coaching, they can have those opportunities, but we want to give them that opportunity to be able to get opportunity like we did to come to the state.
Mm, right. Well, it's been amazing catching up with you and using the podcast to do that. and just to hear something of your story. Thanks for sharing with us.
I appreciate you, man. I appreciate everything that you're doing. And I just want to say it's very humbling, and continue at it, my friend. And, keep being that light.
Thanks, China. This has been the Follow Forward podcast. Hope you've enjoyed this episode. These are real stories, global voices today, coming all the way from South Carolina in the United States with China, Christ-centered servant leadership in action. Stay tuned with us for more conversations celebrating God's faithfulness and mission around the world. See you next time. Thank you for listening to the Follow Forward podcast. This may have been my idea, but I worked with an awesome team to make it come to life. Thank you to Lucy for guest management, scheduling, and being a real gap filler. Jordan for taking over the guest management baton, as well as doing content production, scripting assistance, and editing of these podcasts. Alistair and my lovely wife, Christina, for technical production, and Taryn for taking behind-the-scenes content and crew support. Whether you're watching or listening, make sure to hit that subscribe button on whichever platform you are on, and share this episode with your friends so we can inspire even more people together. We release a new episode every Thursday, along with extra content to help you grow as a leader of people and a follower of Christ. Follow my Facebook page at Dr. Tim Tucker to access all the bonus content. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to send a DM or leave a comment letting us know what you enjoyed about the episode. God bless, and we'll see you next week.